Around 5 years ago in 2020, a new virus, COVID-19, started to rise in the news cycle and irrevocably changed our relationship with public health, community, and impacted all factors of life in some way. As H5N1 continues to pop up in the news cycle, there is a knee-jerk reaction of thinking, not again. While COVID-19 taught us not to underestimate public health issues, every virus is unique, and we are here to help keep you informed on where it started, how it spread, and the way it can impact you. Welcome to BS, a podcast where we take an in-depth look at different scientific and social phenomena and innovations, whilst tying them back to broader societal perspectives and why you should care. We're so happy you're here, and enjoy the episode. I remember this day like I was a soldier. I distinctly remember March 13th, 2020, being in my junior year of high school and just seeing the different reactions from my teachers when they said that they'd be closing school from 2 weeks to indefinitely. There were definitely some teachers who were less than prepared. I remember my AP bio teacher kind of being well, if you don't have access to anything online, and slamming a textbook in front of this girl and basically was good luck. And I remember, of course, my AP environmental science teacher kind of going crazy and giving us everything we needed for the rest of the semester, just running around, printing papers, getting everything together. Lo and behold, she was right. And honestly, her reaction to that really set the scene for how I felt everything was going to go afterwards.
I very much still have the vivid memory of my AP Calc teacher running into our classroom with stacks of paper, and the stacks of paper were just falling off of her arms and onto the floor. And I remember thinking this is hysteria. But lo and behold, that was the last time I ever sat foot in our high school's classroom again. So, well, the beginning of the end.
Very much so. And it's so funny because that same day, this was back when I still worked at Walmart, which honestly, crazy place to work during the beginning of the pandemic. I remember having to put on that Walmart vest and literally walking into the store, and it was that scene in Mean Girls where everybody is just going crazy. It was very zombie apocalypse. That shift it was trench warfare, okay? World War War, it was insanity. All of the groceries being completely cleared out, people fighting over toilet paper. I remember I had to be the toilet paper bandit for my family because my mom was you literally work at Walmart, just take it before y'all put it out. And I mean, that's literally what I did. I was rolling that toilet paper out on a worker's cart so nobody would see me rolling it in a regular cart, and people is this for sale? No, baby, I got 6 other people at home. It actually is not.
I remember going to Walmart during the first couple of days of the pandemic, really during the first couple of days of the lockdown, specifically in our state. And I don't know what I was expecting, but I definitely did not expect to see half our town in that Walmart. Gold, I was just okay, y'all, there were so many people in that Walmart at that time that it wouldn't have even been reasonable to really be able to social distance from anyone. I felt like I was running through the aisles trying to stay away from random people. I was stay away from me. Where are y'all coming from? I'm here to get stuff, but so was everybody else. And that really, to me, set the pace of what the rest of that situation was going to be like.
Yeah, and like both of our moms work in like the healthcare field, so like I don't think our families were ever fully like isolated or social distance, especially in the way that Georgia specifically decided to go about it, since somehow this was up to the states. So yeah, like very crazy, very ununderstandable time in our history.
Yeah. Me and Gold did grow closer over the pandemic, though. That is something.
For sure.
Our group chat had like FaceTime calls every single night. But yeah, this topic is interesting because, and Gold knows this too, I'm very interested in public health and global health. I've taken several classes at my university that have kind of addressed various disease outbreaks, different appropriate strategies to counter like continued transmission in the population. That's why I actually have a podcast recommendation. It's called Public Health on Call. It's put on by different professors and staff at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And they do actually address different public health issues, keep up with currently spreading like viruses and infections across the world. So if this is something that interests you and you also just want to be more informed about what's going on, I think that is a good podcast to start. But as we always start off our podcast, you know, we like to give you the in-depth scoop of what is actually going on with whatever is going on. I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about H5N1. It's been in the news a lot because there have been a lot of different cases in the United States. And actually, sadly, last Tuesday, the first death occurred in the United States for this virus. So I'll just get started with really talking about what bird flu / avian flu is in general. So it's a disease caused by avian influenza A viruses, and hence the name. It usually spreads between birds, not people. The viruses can be classified into two different categories. So there's low pathogenic avian influenza, or LPAIs, and high pathogenic avian influences, or HPAIs. And low pathogenic avian influenzas, they actually cause either no sign or mild signs of diseases in poultry. And so most of the viruses are usually low pathogenic, but they can mutate into high pathogenic strains. And for the high pathogenic strains, those are known to cause severe disease and high mortality in infected poultry. And HPAI, or H5, the current strain that's been spreading worldwide, can cause disease that affects multiple internal organs within poultry, with mortality of up to 90% to 100% in chickens, often within 48 hours. So sorry to the flocks, because they're kind of going through it right now. It's important to designate, though, that these classifications are based on poultry specifically. They do not correlate with the severity of illness in humans, and mild or severe illnesses can occur either due to the low pathogenic or high pathogenic avian influenza, so that's important to keep in mind. The current variant that everybody is hearing about is the H5 subtype, and that's what's been currently spreading, and it's been spreading through wild birds, and so now it's been causing outbreaks across the U.S. in commercial / backyard flocks of poultry, as well as different livestock, mostly cattle. And most notably, there have been a lot of human infections in recent months, so that's of course why we've been getting more media coverage of the continuously spreading disease.
So specifically, we're going to be talking about H5N1, and also if you want to go and do your own research, like that would be the form of avian flu you should be looking into. And the way it's been spreading is mostly through like aquatic birds, because they are like the hosts of these viruses. So there's water birds like ducks, geese, swans, gulls, and terns.
When I looked up terns, first of all, I did not know what these birds look like. I was like, what is a tern? And when I did, like, why are they low-key fly? Like, I was like, wait, they're kind of aesthetic. They kind of got that shit on. I was like, okay.
You know what? Like, big ups to them for, like, keeping it cute while they're going through what they're going through right now.
No, literally. Never look like what you're going through.
And then also shorebirds like storks, plovers, and sandpipers are also like spreading H5N1.
You know, who knew that storks were going to be delivering the bird flu instead of babies?
Me. Like, so it usually spreads through like mucus, saliva, or feces of infected birds or animals. So like think like, maybe even like aerosol drops like while you're around these animals. And currently like all documented cases have either been like bird to bird, bird to animal, animal to animal, or bird to human. So currently we do not have any documented cases of human to human transmission. But as we know, viruses can mutate quite quickly and quite rapidly. So it is definitely still a large public health concern. The CDC currently reports that the majority of humans who are getting H5N1, it's usually due to direct and unprotected contact with the infected animals. And the main ways of exposure has been through infected or dead animals, surfaces contaminated with animal secretions and excretions, eating undercooked and uncooked poultry and poultry products like eggs, or drinking unpasteurized, aka raw milk from infected cows, because there has been cattle to cattle transmission. And honestly, the timing of this could not be I don't want to say perfect, because at the end of the day, I really don't want anything to happen to the raw milk warriors. But I just think it's interesting how like there's been such a rise of the appeal to nature fallacy and such like a return to drinking unpasteurized milk. And there is now this huge outbreak of a very deadly disease that is spreading through raw milk, which could have easily been predicted because it already has been. Like,
I've been wondering since high school what our ancestors would think of us. Like,
oh man. And so there's been one microbiology and immunology professor at Johns Hopkins who basically tried to put it simply and said that the risk is still low and there isn't any current major concerns, but definitely stay away from raw milk and stay away from dead animals. The thing is, though, that is current because we have not, like, the virus is not mutated to a point where there is human to human transmission. So like that can change very quickly, like dependent on just how everything is going with tracking the virus, because every single time that it infects a human, I feel like there was a virologist that put it very like simply, where it's just like Russian roulette. Every single time it gets into a human, it can mutate just a little bit. And there actually has already been evidence of looking at people who are deceased from H5N1, and they're showing mutations in areas that are known for like human transmission, but it has not got to the point yet where there is actual like direct human to human transmission. And if we do get there, which again, like could happen with every infection, there is a chance it could be catastrophic. Like this disease currently has a mortality rate of like around 53% for humans, and COVID had a mortality rate of less than 5% as we know of. And we saw what that did to like in terms of like the death toll, how it overwhelmed our hospitals, and how it, again, like changed the course of the decade, probably changed the course of your life if you were alive to even like experience it. And yeah, so that's why like a new mutated strand could really, really like cause very severe issues, and it could do just as much, if not more damage than the COVID-19 pandemic. And so right now, the symptoms that they've been currently putting out there as a way to kind of like know if you may have H5N1, which like, you know, don't get like scared that you have it, because again, like we're not even at that point yet. But the mild symptoms usually are like conjunctivitis, which is like eye redness and irritation, as well as mild fever, cough, sore throat, runny nose, muscle aches and headaches, and fatigue, which I'm sure y'all are tired of hearing that for every single viral infection, but it's still important to know.
Yeah, it's very important to note that a lot of the mild symptoms present very similarly to the normal flu.
Yeah.
So, don't get overly worried if you have just regular flu symptoms. It is seasonal flu season. It's flu season. But at the same time, if you are a worker that works in animals / poultry industry or cattle industry, there then would be an increased kind of attention to detail for symptoms.
For sure, yeah. I've already heard people in the public health sphere saying that flu season coming around definitely made it even more difficult to track H5N1 spread. But some moderate to severe symptoms that may differ a little bit from your average flu symptoms were high fever, shortness of breath / difficulty breathing, altered consciousness, and seizures. And I think that is definitely one of the larger and more ear-perking ones. And like Ilyana said, the people who are most at risk are definitely going to be poultry and dairy farmers, as well as other livestock workers, people who have backyard bird flocks and chickens, veterinarians, and other people who are working in the veterinary staff, as well as animal health responders and public health responders, food processing workers, and just anyone who works with contaminated animals or just animals and food products in general as a catch-all, since we are not doing the best job tracking this virus, to be very honest. But yeah, that is the scope of how it's spreading and where we currently are with the transmission.
So this is a section I know people are definitely going to be wanting to listen to, but how damaging actually is the virus, especially if it does mutate and start running through us like the Tomb Raider. So the severity of the virus can range from mild to severe, with obviously the most severe outcome being death. Eye redness, respiratory symptoms, and fevers have been the main signs reported. So like we said, mostly mild symptoms. However, if the virus does end up escalating to a more severe form, complications can include pneumonia, respiratory failure, acute respiratory distress syndrome, acute kidney injury, multi-organ failure, which is basically when your kidneys and other symptoms fail at the same time, sepsis or septic shock, meningoencephalitis, and that's just inflammation of the brain.
Dang, it really sounds like one of those drug commercials when they're trying to get you to try. Because dang near half the list may lead to death, to be real.
Ruflacib. Go ahead and take it. However, symptoms include
your
diarrhea,
arms are falling off, your
left
legs are falling off,
kidney scratching. You may have a tapeworm. And most importantly, you may die suddenly at any time.
Any time.
Talk to your primary care physician.
Y'all be putting them PCPs through it with the new drug you saw during that Hulu ad.
No, literally. People are thought to be most contagious during the first few days of infection. Infection usually lasts a few days or up to less than 2 weeks, so it's not a virus that really lasts for very long. However, more severe cases obviously have higher levels of the virus throughout their body and therefore can be contagious for several weeks. And it's important to note that people who don't have symptoms can still be contagious to others. Very COVID-19-like, where it's just because you're asymptomatic does not mean that you do not have the virus and or are not capable of spreading it to other people. And I do think that was a huge factor of how COVID was able to spread so wide, was that people were unaware of the fact that they were living hosts, basically, for the pathogens. Current treatments. So if you do end up getting diagnosed with avian influenza A virus infections, they just put you on flu antiviral drugs. The CDC said that people with symptoms after being exposed to infectious animals should immediately be put on flu antivirals, specifically oseltamivir. I think that's a specific medication that's very effective. However, if people who work, I guess, in the animal or poultry industry who weren't wearing PPE, which is personal protective equipment, or had some sort of breach of it, may still be offered antivirals, even if they have no symptoms, just due to their elevated risk due to occupation. And antiviral treatment works best within 48 hours of developing symptoms, which is why actually they deliver treatment to you even if they haven't fully completed testing, just because if it is potentially possible, then it's best to give you the treatment as soon as possible, even without a confirmed positive. And currently, there are no vaccines that are commercially available to fight against avian influenza viruses, especially the specific H5N1 subtype. And it's also very important to note, I know I say important to note a lot, but these things are important to note, that seasonal flu vaccines do not protect against the bird flu. I am sorry, but when you went to your PCP, got the shot, and got your lollipop, that's not going to help you in this case, y'all.
However, still go get the shot and your lollipop, because the last thing we need is to be dealing with that too. You know, like keep up with your boosters, keep up with your flu shots, because clearly we have like bigger fish to fry. And I wish people would be, you know, more proactive when it came to like keeping up with the things that we have found some kind of treatment towards as we enter whatever new monster is behind us.
So the CDC has developed some candidate vaccine viruses for the H5N1 type. They're called CVVs, and a CVV is basically what is used to make flu vaccines. And they said that the preliminary analysis suggests that they could be effective protection for the current circulating strain, but obviously they need to continue to be developed into an actual vaccine. And Moderna, which is a big pharmaceutical company, recently just got awarded $590 million from the federal government to help accelerate development of an mRNA-based bird flu vaccines. And mRNA vaccines are interesting because rather than traditional vaccine technology where you use some form of weakened or inactive virus that you inject into the body to build up tolerance basically against the virus, mRNA vaccines just allow replications of proteins that can fight off infections or contribute to an immune response. So they're actually easier to develop and manufacture. So hopefully soonish we will have a vaccine that will be available to protect against the virus.
So as our current state of treatments aren't really the best, I'm sure y'all are wondering like where we are currently with this vaccine and this like virus, and is it too late? And right now there is only like 67 total reported human cases in the United States. And again, like these numbers are very current and things can change very quickly if human to human transmission does develop. And there's more than 950 cases that have been reported globally through the World Health Organization, in which more than half of those have resulted in death, which is why it is still like something to definitely be alert to. And for the United States, there has been, as we mentioned, one death associated with the virus in Louisiana from a person whose backyard flock was mingling with wild birds and ended up infecting him. Now, this person was 65 plus and had underlying medical conditions, but like I just want to keep people very aware that these were the same stats that they were pulling up when the first COVID deaths started dropping in, and how like just because somebody may be disabled or elderly does not mean it cannot impact those who are young and healthy, and that does not mean that they are not worth protecting. Now, for animals, it's really ran through poultry. I mean, there has been almost 140 million poultry across the United States that have been affected by H5N1. And it's 928 dairy herds who have also been affected. So if you have been seeing, again, the egg prices, the milk prices going up, that's because they are euthanizing a lot of these birds, and a lot of the milk production that they used to have, like it has just dipped very dramatically. And because of that, like the U.S. Department of Agriculture has put around like $98 million last May into response efforts for H5N1, but they've spent like around 1.7 billion, almost 2 billion since 2022. And the Department of Health and Human Services, which like is like an umbrella term that also includes like the CDC, has put around 101 million. Also in May, around the same time, the USDA put that money in to help increase testing and screening and to reduce public health risks, because like the abysmal tracking, no shade, is part of the reason why we are where we are for H5N1. U.S. egg production has lowered by like 5%, which has raised the prices very considerably, like by around 39%. But honestly, from a shopper, it seems even more than that. Like I feel like those eggs doubled in price overnight. And as a very frugal person, I'm definitely watching. And milk production went down 20%. So there has, as y'all have seen, been a very large rise in milk prices also. And a lot of the other economic repercussions come from employers not wanting to provide workers' comp for sick employees. Again, very telltale sign, very deja vu from COVID-19 years. And employees aren't getting tested, oftentimes due to costs, which, like I said, again, it seems like we're doing all of the wrong things over and over again.
Yeah, I'm especially worried too for states whose main industries are poultry, cattle, egg and milk production. And like you said, for these employees who at the end of the day, this is their living. And as much as obviously, especially the two of us really always want to assert public health, it's really hard sometimes when your literal way of life and the way that you survive is tied to something that allows for greater dissemination of a virus, because we don't even really live in a current society in which it is feasible for people to be able to stay home from their jobs, quarantine, and like do everything necessary and possible in order to prevent transmission. So it'll definitely be interesting to see the economic repercussions like rolling out maybe into other food products and other parts of our economy as it continues to spread.
For sure. Like, I mean, again, like as we continue to like reference COVID because it was our most recent pandemic, it was a very nuanced situation in terms of like why people weren't staying home, why people weren't wearing masks. And it wasn't always just pure selfishness or a lack of concern for the situation. Our government is supposed to provide us with the most comfortable way that we can prioritize public health. And they failed to do that last pandemic, and as we are looking at the H5N1 virus, they're not doing the best job again. And honestly, that's why there's been such a large divide between scientists and the government in terms of how we should go about it. And again, nuanced topic, because obviously there's scientists in the CDC and the USDA that work for the government, and it's just not seeming like the federal government is taking the recommendations from the virologists that they could be. Like, for one, the USDA didn't even require lactating cows to be tested before they had interstate travel until like April 29th. But by then, the outbreak had already been spread to 8 other states. So it's just showing how like a lack of concern and care, or just not having that speed when it comes to things like this, just leads to more chances for the virus to mutate, more chances for it to spread. And they've also made farmers testing their herds kind of optional, and many have just straight up declined, even when they were promised to get the money from like whatever amount of animals that were sick reimbursed to them, because it was bad PR wise. It made them seem like a farm that failed, a farm that had unhealthy birds or cattle. So they just did not want to test and outwardly state that they were one of the farms, which is, again, only increasing the spread and killing all of these animals for no good reason, as well as giving it more opportunities to mutate. And yeah, public health is once again taking a back burner in a situation like this, which can be slightly understood because human to human transmission has not started yet. But it's just like public health taking a back burner is part of the reason why we may end up with human to human transmission. So yeah, and like I've already said multiple times, like the virologists have spoken out against how poorly the United States specifically has been doing in terms of tracking this virus, which is not going to help the spread at all. And they also have different opinions on when a vaccine is created, like whether farmers should be prioritized, because they believe they should, but the government is not necessarily behind that yet. And then another thing to really consider is who is most at risk when things like this break out, viruses, and it always falls on the back of marginalized populations, people who live in low income areas, because a lot of the containment for these animals is being done by immigrant temp workers, and they're not even being supplied with the correct PPE. They don't have goggles, they don't have masks, they don't have gloves. And that was some of the main ways that the H5N1 virus was spreading, was people not having access to correct PPE while dealing with dead and infected birds.
So we've covered a lot of information regarding the science of the H5N1 and also how it's been spreading and the current situation in the United States. But obviously, we wanted to kind of just give our thoughts about how everything's been going, and of course the call back to a very familiar situation that we've all dealt with. And for me, one of the biggest things I think is going to be a factor of how people kind of perceive this virus is almost like this alert fatigue. And alert fatigue, it often is used specifically in terms of like medical professionals, but I'm definitely think we can broaden it to just the general public. But basically, you're constantly being inundated with alerts and messages and communication that something is urgent and requires immediate action. But therefore, what ends up happening is that if everything is overreported as urgent, nothing is made a priority. People do not have the facilities or abilities to make everything number one, level one, DEFCON 5, like all hands on deck. But then it becomes really hard because you have to walk that fine line between actually reporting emergencies that need adequate responses, but then over-reporting everything. And then also public health officials have even come out and said that they're trying to be cautious because they know how the public can respond and how easy it can be to almost like whip up hysteria and whip up a frenzy over communication. So they almost have to choose their words very carefully to not make people unnecessarily scared, but also not leave out important information to make sure that we have a well-educated populace that can adequately deal with what's going on. And so, yeah, I feel really bad for virologists right now and CDC workers because it's a very fine line. And we've also seen that the way people in this country can act in the face of a public health emergency isn't always the best either.
And honestly, I feel like there even comes to a point where there's some underreporting because like they don't want to seem like they don't have a situation under control, and especially because of all of the trust that was lost in public health during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's a very, again, like fine line to walk on. I also feel like because they're working with such a disillusioned populace, it's like you want to make a point that this is something that you should care about, but it's just difficult to get that point across because I just feel like people felt that way with COVID-19. And because there's like definitely a gap in terms of the amount of information that professionals and the populace has in terms of what was going on behind the scenes, what the COVID-19 pandemic could have looked like. A lot of people have a feeling that the measures that were taken did not work at all, regardless of whether that is the truth or not.
I'd also like to add in something that I just realized too, is that I feel like the media plays a part in this too.
For sure.
And the ways they go about reporting on specifically like health and medical interventions. Like, it is especially frustrating too, being a STEM major and a STEM major. We're both STEM majors that work in like medical related fields, and like the almost like disproportionate divide between like what actual like peer reviewed sources, government agencies, health officials are actually saying, and the ways they're wording it, and the information and statistics that they're actually putting out, and what y'all are choosing to focus on, the words that you're specifically choosing to pinpoint in your articles, the people that you're choosing to interview, and the inflammatory responses they're often giving. And that's not to say that like government agencies and scientists don't deserve to be questioned consistently. I'm the first person to say, be a critic to everything, because you want to make sure that you're well informed and not just taking in information, but digesting it and processing it well. But at the same time, because you guys want clicks, because you guys want money, because you guys know that people are easily inflamed and health is such a topic for people, like obviously that's going to be a very high on people's list of priorities, that it is something that's going to get you a lot of attention if you kind of ramp it up in the way you talk about it. Very yellow journalism. And that obviously never helps in these situations, because it just leads to more distrust when, once again, there's a divide in the ways that we're reporting on things, but y'all are just getting people incredibly scared.
Yeah, like a lack of reading comprehension in a population on top of yellow journalism does not lead to any actual like factual information getting spread in any way that matters. And another thing that I feel like needs to be focused on is the government not learning from previous mistakes. Like, there was such a lack of public trust from the USDA, from the CDC, from just our federal government in total. Like, we didn't already have issues with that in the United States, but the just ridiculously just awful like way we dealt with COVID, and the fact that we are continuing to not take certain things with the level of seriousness that they should be taken, like that is not helping your population have trust in you and actually want to pursue like health measures, because they feel like they're not going to work, like because they can't really tell very strongly the difference between when y'all are trying and when y'all are not, because you're never proactive with it. Y'all, like, the government is never putting out things quickly enough and putting out measures strict enough. So there's just a lot of like nihilism there.
Yeah, and I'm also kind of worried considering the history of how the population has acted in the past, because a lot of it was lack of trust in the government and just poor surveillance and poor legislation. But at the same time, some of it is also the way that people act, their lack of seriousness, their selfishness, and also very much a mentality of, if it doesn't affect me, then it doesn't matter. And that points to a much larger problem that we're not tackling today of Western individualism and the ways that plays out when community is needed the most. And then obviously I'm also worried about the incoming administration, especially since a lot of people on the cabinet or in high positions have literally come out and said that they might not have views that are as let's just say compatible with public health relations. For example, a notorious figure, love him or hate him, I don't know, RFK Jr. said that he wants to expand access to raw milk. But that is a major spread of infection. And so it really makes me kind of wonder what kind of an effect is that going to have on the public response if the virus's spread worsens. Because you literally are having a clash of governmental figures who are supposed to be high up, and then other government agencies who are like, do not drink like if you go to the CDC's website right now, they're telling you, do not drink unpasteurized milk. But what happens when you're continuously getting conflicting information?
Exactly. And honestly, on top of all of that and the pseudoscience that has been being pushed by the incoming administration, like because of people's lackadaisical attitude towards public health, things like mask banning, like in order to enhance our surveillance state, is now being like pushed in certain cities, certain states as something that is okay because that is more important than the actual health of the population. And how can we, as a nation who already treats things like the environment as something that is an optional thing to care about, now also treat public health as an optional thing to care about when these two things are clearly connected, and we will just continue to have problems on problems on problems if we don't get both of these things in order. And on top of, again, a completely dismissive attitude towards public health issues, we see a lot of just anti-disabled propaganda and also using them as some kind of scapegoat for the rest of the population. Like, it is almost like framing news articles like it's okay that this person died, or that you shouldn't be worried that this person died because they were either elderly or disabled. Like I said, first of all, those people deserve to live too. They were not prioritized in the COVID pandemic, and now y'all are doing it again. And also, it just gives people a false sense of security because, like I said, there was such an emphasis on somebody being elderly or disabled when they died from COVID during like the COVID-19 pandemic, which is still low-key ongoing, that people felt like they should be cool and they should be safe because they were not othered the way that disabled people were. And we saw how that panned out then. And I have a very strange feeling that we will be seeing similar things happen again, where people put their guard down because of y'all's purposeful shaping of public health issues as an issue for those who are disabled. And it comes and bites everybody in the ass at the end of the day.
It's sad to see, very sad to see, and also sad to see that we haven't really learned from the past, which I thought was one of the biggest lessons we learned in school, but I guess not everybody got that memo. So to wrap it up, we just want to make sure that you guys come away with these main takeaways. So yes, right now the risk to the public is low because human-to-human transmission has not occurred yet, and it has mostly been just spreading through infected animals. However, if that virus mutates, not gonna lie, guys, we might be fucked. With a mortality rate of more than 50% and public health institutions currently being very competitive and divided in the ways in which to approach this, it could end up being a lot more serious. And obviously more transmissions means more mutations, and more opportunities for something like this to ramp up. So it really is time for us to get our shit together, to be more cautious, and hopefully start learning lessons. And we also just wanted to say, you should definitely be frequently checking announcements and alerts from public health agencies like the CDC or the USDA. Be really mindful of food safety and recalls too of food products potentially. And overall, just be maintaining proper hygiene, washing your hands frequently, not necessarily like rubbing your eyes, and being careful in terms of coming into contact with wild animals. But with that, thank you guys for tuning into the episode, and we'll see y'all later. Bye.